some of us church ladies went and floated down the river, and there was a lovely woman who joined us, and we floated down the river together. She's Black, and when we were driving back in the car, I asked her just straight up, like, how does this affect you? You're a nurse here at Memorial, and you live in a really white community, and there's been these riots. How are you doing? And she was so thankful that I asked her and asked for my phone number, and we had a great conversation. And I think that just asking, she even said the people, she's staying in the guest house of a Caucasian family, and they even brought her into their home when everything happened with the riots and asked her how she was doing. And she said that meant the world to her, and she called her parents, even just to let them know, hey, this family that I'm staying with took the time to ask me if I was okay.
And that just lends itself to how important it is to just ask people how they're doing.
Yeah.
And initially, I think sometimes I might be taken aback by somebody asking me how I'm doing because it doesn't happen often. But when it does happen, it really genuinely feels good. And like it feels like you're creating those allies in the community. And it just feels like, wow, people don't hate me because of the way I look. And people do care that there's been this systematic hurt and oppression that has happened, and they're willing to address it. Because like I said, and when I talked about the riots, that happened in April of 1992.
Right.
And these situations that have happened are a direct parallel to what's happening now and what progress have we made. And really that progress could have started with conversations. 30 years ago, someone could have said, well, this happened, these riots happened. What if that student on the playground had said, what's going on? Explain to me, how can I help? What can I do? What am I seeing? Why is it that I'm allowing the media to dictate how I feel about you as opposed to just asking you what things are like?
Okay, so let's talk about the church and what role has the church played in facilitating this conversation and engaging in the culture and what's happening, and what has your experience been growing up and even just now in Sonoma County with the church and what's happening?
There's definitely been an awkward silence, and I think that has been the norm for a long time. And with people of color, I think that we already have a level of expectation for people that we deal with at work, out in the community, at the grocery store, wherever whatever businesses we patronize. And we kind of expect that there might be some disconnect there. But when you go to the church, and just by definition what the church is and what it's supposed to stand for, our expectations are a lot higher. And our hopes are that this is going to be a safe space always. And it's going to be somewhere where they can see that I'm hurting, or they see the deficits in the community, and they're going to fill all of those gaps. But it hasn't happened. And I think that makes the hurt, it just magnifies the hurt. And it makes things a little uncomfortable and not welcoming sometimes.
So even church isn't necessarily a safe place to walk in and feel like you're accepted and loved and seen. So what do you think, what are some active steps as individuals within the church? Again, I think that obviously one of the biggest things we've talked about is just specifically on a personal level, reaching out to people that you know. What are some things that you think the church more on a corporate level ought to be doing or could be doing to just encourage and promote change?
I think that acknowledging that there have been shortcomings in the past and that there's been this blind spot that hasn't been addressed, acknowledging that there's been a hurt to a certain group of people, and just being willing to assemble committees or groups that are willing to address this and saying, we're here for you. We're going to provide these avenues for us to make right the wrongs that have happened to you. And it's not that the church is wrong these people. It's just that our community as a whole has fell short. And I think the church can step in and say, let's figure out ways to start pushing things in the right direction. And let's start facilitating change and being that catalyst for new beginnings here in the church.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to jump shift to a slightly different topic. We talked about the church, but you had previously mentioned being on the playground and having kids say mean things. And something that I felt like when we first had our conversation, just me personally as a mom raising 3 kids, I feel a very strong and intense responsibility to raise children who would defend and would know to stand up for and be mindful of any kind of racism that's happening. How would you encourage parents who are raising children to effectively educate? Because something you said to me in our conversation too was kids aren't raised.
Yeah.
They aren't born racist, right? They don't come out racist. That is learned behavior. So how can we as parents do a really great job at raising kids that are loving and kind and see people as equals?
I think parents can understand that just inherently children are kind of leery and afraid of things that they don't understand or new things. And if they see someone that doesn't look like them, if they see someone that they never see on television, mentioned in a positive way, they're not going to understand it, and they might be a little skeptical to interact with that person. But it's on the parent, I think, to start addressing that and teaching them that we are all equal, highlighting wonderful people in the past who have done great things for the community, who are people of color, and teaching them about that, including that in the history that they teach them about people in general, making sure that the parent doesn't engage in like racist jokes or just understand that the child is going to, like, that child is a direct reflection of how you treat people.
Right.
So if you are, how do I say this? If you have these implicit biases and you discriminate against people and you don't even see it, and you start to see your child doing the same thing, it's probably maybe a product of something that you've done or not done. So it's really important to do the work on the front end to educate your child and to have that conversation with them from a young age and teach them that, aesthetically we look different, but we are all equal. We're all God's children. And it's important that we are fair and equitable to everybody that we come across and not allow these differences in our appearance or our culture to dictate how we treat one another.
Right. Okay, so let's say, like you were saying, okay, we live in a very white community here, or a predominantly Caucasian and Latino community. Would you say that having racially diverse books and even going out of your way to find racially diverse shows and just presenting kids with more of a making that more of a normal thing for their, even just for their eyeballs, so that that doesn't feel scary or it doesn't feel uncomfortable, and then when they ask, having that conversation and keeping that conversation open and going with them.
Yeah, absolutely important on the front end to do that work and to find diverse ways of teaching your children or educating them. And I think that one thing that's interesting you'll see is that if you are deliberate about that, trying to find books about people of color or, positive African Americans in history and things like that, it's a little bit of a challenge, especially around here. If you go to Target or Walmart or any of the big box stores and look for dolls of color or books about, Black history, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be as readily available. But I think that doing that work and even speaking with these stores and encouraging these things in our community is going to make it easier and make it more accessible for you to educate your children and teach them and have these conversations with them, and not just educate them, but yourself about people in our community.
Yeah. So we want to, and we will provide in this different resources because we want to be helpful. And so some of the resources I know I have on my end are some really great books for kids that are racially diverse and give really good stories about people in history. And I know that you guys have some too. And so we'll add that just so that you guys have some resources.